Welcome to Loose Mesh, the lacrosse podcast, the place where the tape's off, the gloves are off, and the stories come straight from the barn. From rookie bus rides to championship runs, we're breaking down the game with the players, the legends, and the voices that live it. Whether you're a weekend warrior or a pro chasing rings, grab a cold one, string up the stick, and let's get loose.
Today's guest is one of the most influential figures in box lacrosse. From building championship teams to making one of the boldest front office moves the leagues have ever seen, Derek Keenan has been at the center of the NLL for decades. Coach, GM, lifelong student of the game. His impact goes way beyond the scoreboard. We're keeping it casual and talking lacrosse and the mindset behind it with Mr. 300 games. Let's welcome to the pod, Derek Keenan. Jammer, how are you today, fella?
Good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
No worries. So, let's just get right to the brass tacks here. Like 300 games, that's actually like it's an amazing accomplishment, especially like in today's age, to where coaches' longevity isn't really the longest. Like you've had a couple days now to look back on it. Like, what does getting to coach 300 games in the National League actually mean to Derek Keenan right now?
I hadn't really thought about it until the other night because I wasn't really aware until about maybe a week before one of our broadcasters, our sideline girl, Heather, mentioned it to me. So I wasn't really aware of it, but it was a fun night. It was a cool night. We got the result we wanted, which was most important for me. But to be honest, I can't believe it's been that many games. It doesn't feel like it has been. But then again, at the same time, I am of the age where it's possible, so I, I, I don't see there's another 300 in the cards, but you never know. But it's just a credit to all the people I've worked with over the years, the players, ownership, coaches I've worked with. And, I'm fortunate now to have another really good group with me and really good coaches with me who, to be honest, they do the large part of the work now. And it's just nice to be a part of it.
Derek, I want to take you back to 2012. I think it was 2012, but it might have been earlier. It was the first you traded for Brody Merrill, and then Brody Merrill came in the next year, and he was named captain. And you were standing in Rexall Place in Edmonton, and I said, "Hey, Derek," and I said, "I have a question." I said, "How come is Brody Merrill the captain and not Jimmy Quinlan? And he's been here since day one." And now I look back at it, man, I was 13 years old. I just keep laughing at the story. My brother told me about it when I told him, "Hey, I'm having Derek Keenan on." And he goes, "Do you remember that story when you were mad at Derek Keenan, when you were mad at him because Jimmy Quinlan wasn't the captain?" I'm like, Yep, I do remember that.
Yeah, we actually got Brody in the expansion draft when my previous team, Portland, folded. So he was the first pick. We had the first pick, and I took Brody. I had him for 4 years in Portland. He was just a phenomenal player and leader. Well, I think it was kind of easy for me because Jimmy wasn't the captain when I got there. And interestingly enough, after I did trade Brody a few years later, I did make Jimmy the captain. And now, he's been with me for a long time. As an assistant coach, now co-head coach, but he's a quality guy, and as was Brody. But for me at the time, given Brody's experience I had with him in Portland, it was a pretty easy decision.
For sure. When people talk about GOAT status, you come to first of my mind and GM and head coach. You've built winners in non-traditional markets, but what's the biggest misconception about building championships outside of hotbeds?
Sorry, what's the biggest what?
Misconception.
Well,
like how I feel like it's harder for you to build a championship team than Buffalo.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point, and it can be difficult in a remote sort of island type market, as we call it. But we've been fortunate. We've over the years we've missed on draft picks. We've had really good ones. We've made trades we've been lucky on. Like, let's be honest. Like, I didn't expect to get Mark Matthews after, going to a final. That was just kind of luck. And then I ended up with first overall again, like 2 years, 2 out of the 3 years after that. And that was just honestly like trades that I'd made previously that worked out. So a lot of it's luck, to be honest. But, in terms of, attracting even free agents, it's about kind of what we've built, and reputation wise. Um, players want to play for us, and they want to play for Jimmy and Jeremy and the guys that we already have there, and our leadership group and that. So, and the leadership group's changed over time, but the hope is that you want to attract players to stay there and to come there. I mean, you know, I think a lot was made of the splashes that were made by a few teams this year in free agency. Well, our splash was kind of made by retaining our guys, and that's not really talked about a lot, but we retained our key free agents and none of them left. And to us, that's a win as much as signing someone from outside like we did last year with Austin Shanks was obviously a really big pickup for us, especially in the playoffs.
So like your teams have always kind of been based around like discipline and structure, right? And I've kind of got to see that a little bit firsthand, and then everybody's kind of seen it now through the last couple of years of success. How is like your coaching style evolved, like with today's game being like the players are younger and they're bigger, stronger, faster?
It has, I mean, I think you always have to evolve. I mean, that's one thing that I learned a long time ago, that you have to listen to people around you, listen to your coaches, listen to other coaches, see what other people do, but then also have a kind of a baseline of principles and kind of rules that you live by, and then you try and find the right people to fit into that system or those principles that you live by. And like I said, it doesn't always work, and we obviously had a couple tough years there with the rush, but when we looked at kind of starting over again, those are the things we looked at, and we kept the guys we felt we needed to keep, and then from there on it was mostly a younger group. So but yeah, I mean, I think you need to have um, not only structure, but we look a lot at character too. We really do. We want to bring good people in, and if you find out at some point, or I find at some point, they're not, then they don't last very long in our program. So, that's just the way it is. And I think we have those people now, and it's always a work in progress too. The one thing that I've believed in and I learned a long time ago from Les Bartley is to try and build relationships with your players, and to be honest with them at all times. And sometimes honesty's tough, but I think the relationship building's a big part of it, and a big kind of part of our principles, and a part of, why guys want to be here too.
So now, like, kind of in saying that, how do you like continually get all of this buy-in from these guys while still being so like demanding on your structure and on your principles and your like your core beliefs that you're not going to kind of sway from, like, you get a certain player and you can sway from an offensive tactic here or there, but like I know
Yeah.
you relatively well and you have
Mhm.
those core beliefs and those core demands. So like how do you just maintain all of that, like working all together?
Mhm. Again, I think it goes to the character of the guys you bring in, and also a little bit of success helps. A little bit of a track record helps. A little bit of reputation of how you treat people helps, and that helps to get guys, to buy in, hopefully on a consistent basis.
You won championships at basically at every level as a coach, but as a builder, a player, what's harder, winning once, sustaining success, and on top of that, winning championships? Is there one season that stands out? It was the hardest to get through?
Sustaining is really hard in the NLL now. If you look at over the years with the amount of expansion, and then at times you lose a team or two as well. But that it's difficult at that level. I think it's difficult to sustain at any level now, because I think there's a lot of really good players in the game, and and the good thing is they're spread out and there's depth in the game. And I was concerned when we expanded to so many teams. for a few years there that there wouldn't be enough talent, but it's proven that there is, and the game's still really good at the NLL level. But in terms of, in my opinion, the hardest to win, and I've been in all of them pretty much, is a Mann Cup. I really think a Mann Cup's hard to win. I think it's hard to build a winner, to do it the right way, and to do it honestly, and kind of build with your own programs and that. I think it's really, really difficult to win. And that's not taken away from any other championships, or like the NLL's obviously not easy either. But, Mann Cups, are a little different now than they used to be, but, they're all difficult, and they're all rewarding, and they're all fun. And, they're all, any ring on the finger is a good one, to be honest.
It's funny you bring that up because I was at the 2011 Minto Cup in Okotoks when Mark
Hmm.
Matthews was there, and like,
Hmm.
man, what a stud of a lineup you guys had there.
Well, and so did Coquitlam. I mean, if you look at that Minto Cup and look at the number of players that are
Oh,
still in the NLL and have played in the NLL from both of those teams, it's phenomenal. Like, there's probably 30 guys, which is pretty incredible. They were two of the strongest organizations in the country at the time, and some really good battles there for a few years.
when you evaluate players as a GM, what's one trait that doesn't stand out on a stat sheet but matters the most?
We really like athleticism. You know, we and then even from a defensive perspective, we like skill. And obviously on the offensive end, skills, it's an imperative. There's kind of no replacement for it. Um, but yeah, we like athleticism, and we've said this a lot. We on our defensive end, we're not the biggest team, but I won't sacrifice size for athleticism. We were really lucky this year in the draft that we got a bigger kid in Levi Birch who we're developing, and we needed a little bit of size, but at the same time, I think we're really quick, and we're able to get out and put pressure on teams, and play the style that we like to play. So that's one thing that we really look for. And then, of course, if in the NLL part, and even with the kids when I coach junior, you kind of follow their careers, and as kids in minor, and you get to know their character a little bit, and their families. And same thing at the NLL level, you do your work, and you try and get them into interviews before the draft, and try and bring in good people.
Derek, moving on to a little bit of your playing career here, and something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. You were a part of one of the greatest rivalries in lacrosse history in the 80s and the 90s between the Redmen and the Bellies. What's something that
Hmm.
people today don't really understand about how intense those rivalries were, and how different the game of lacrosse has been since those mid 80s wars and those early
Hmm.
90s wars that you guys
Hmm.
had in Queens Park there?
Well, the funny thing is, like, for such a rivalry, we'd only see them in the Mann Cup. That was it. So whereas Peterborough you'd see every week, and that was a pretty good rivalry too. So, but well, probably first and foremost is pretty much 95% of the players use wood sticks. So that was a different ball game. You know, I think we had a lot of respect for one another, to be honest, as much as we went after it, and they were great series. They were always, in the early times, a little bigger than us, and a little more physical. And then we brought this guy named Scott McMichael in, and that kind of leveled the playing field a little bit. Thankfully, for guys like me, I didn't have to mix it up as much as I did at one time. So I always thank Pete and Bob Dignan for doing that. So, but yeah, I mean, we had some tremendous lacrosse games and battles, and it was a lot of fun. And like I said, I've always had a lot of respect for those teams and those players.
How much did those Man Cups like shape the way you develop and you build your teams today now
Well,
and coach even?
the game's different now. I mean, I think the one thing I learned from Peter Vipon, he's one of my mentors, is kind of be the calm patience and building a team, and even patience in a game. and kind of trying to be a player's coach as much as you can and be honest with guys. And then, like I said, the game's different. Like we played basically up and down the floor, 3 lines, and it didn't really evolve till like OD till later on, probably after I was done playing. So even when I played in Buffalo in 92, 93, we played 3 lines up and down the floor, and there was very little specialization. And man, we played a ton back then too, a lot of minutes because we only had 15 runners. So you certainly had to be fit, but different game, different times, and now we still we still bring a lot of those principles in. Even I learned in junior from Jim Bishop and guys like him and Bob Hanna and Peter Vipon and that the transition game largely can be very much the same, in terms of how you structure your breakouts and that, and obviously you're most often changing, but sometimes you don't, and you really kind of push the envelope on that and try and put some pressure on the other teams.
On top of that, you talk about patience, and Jimmy has a lot of patience, but shows it in a different way. He's more enthusiastic than you. How do you guys work together on a daily basis? It's just so
It's
different.
yeah, it's easy because he's the energy guy, right? And I'm kind of the old guy that just sort of analyzes and sits back, and I do a fair amount of chirping from the sideline at practices and that, and Jimmy and Jared pretty much run things, and I have my say on obviously on everything, but they do a really good job. But Jimmy just brings a ton of energy that I don't necessarily have every weekend these days.
So going back to those, excuse me, going back to that 92-93 series or season, sorry. You win back-to-back titles with the Bandits, and then you don't play another NLL game until 1999 with the Ontario
hmm
Raiders. Like, what was the reasoning behind that 6-year gap? And then how different was the league, like, when you came back in 99 as opposed to the 92-93 seasons?
We started having a family, and kind of didn't make sense for me to get out there and muck it up for I think we made 150 or 175 bucks a game or something. So and I was kind of working on my other career as well, back home. So and then 99, I was actually in Toronto when Ontario they moved to Toronto that year at the Rock, and I was kind of the Reggie Dunlop. I played and coached, so it was quite a bit different. It was really different, and I came back and played 1 year with Brooklyn in 95. And by then it was pretty much OD. And it was kind of my first time really doing that. So that by 99, it was pretty much that. And I remember our first game that year when I played, we were in Baltimore, and Gary Gate was playing for Baltimore, and Les just wanted to kind of try to run 3 lines. And Gator scored 10, and we got spanked, and that was the end of that because the game had evolved and changed so much. You just really couldn't do it, unfortunately. But that's just like I said, the game evolves, and you got to be able to evolve with it.
Let's jump back into the GM role, Derek. When you drafted Josh Zawada, a guy that I used to play with out here in Alberta.
Yeah.
You drafted Jake Naso. You drafted Andrew McAdory. When
Mhm.
scouting Americans who didn't play a high-level box lacrosse other than Josh Zawada, what do you look in their traits to seem that they can make a performance impact with the Saskatchewan Rush?
Well, again, the athleticism part, the character part. We knew a little more about Josh than most guys because he did play in Canada a little bit, and he went to school in Canada a little bit, and Jimmy knew him. We love what we saw of him in college at Michigan and Duke. And then, um, you know, we gave him an opportunity last year, mostly on the practice roster. When he came in and played, he did play well. And then this year, we moved Triolo out, we give him a full on chance, and he's been really quite good for us. He brings another element for us. He's really quick and very dynamic, shoots the ball well. So, and then with Nazo, that's a great one because I've always been reluctant to have a quote unquote face off guy. And I finally caved, and my whole reasoning behind it was that our theory always was that, face-offs are really important in the last minute of the game if it's really close. Um, and other than that, if you don't get scored on off a face-off, then you know what? You get the ball back and the possessions are equal. But at the same time, it can be taxing on your defense. And you play Halifax when they really had our number there for a couple of years. We would literally like win 2 face-offs. And so we're playing a lot of defense. At times you're expending a lot of energy to try and create turnovers. And so we had an opportunity to get a kid who, we knew was really, really good in college and was really, really good in high school. And we spoke to him and asked if he'd be interested in playing, and he said, "Yeah, absolutely." He was very interested, and he's worked out really well. Now we're trying to evolve his game too, though, to play some defense. He's definitely got skill. He's an athlete. The defense part of things a work in progress, but he works hard at it. And with us though, you only practice once a week, and it's usually the night before the game. We're not out there killing each other. So, but so those have been good. I mean, and then McAdory, same thing. I had really good information on him because he actually went to high school with Nazel, and he was a Duke guy as well. Just a guy who's a superior athlete, and couldn't play this year because of school commitments. But we'll see him at camp next year.
That was my next question. Do you think you see him playing again next year? Obviously, I guess yes to that one.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was just he got into a master's program at Duke, and he found it a little bit difficult because I know from last year when both Nazel and Zawada were still living in North Carolina, the travel was tough. It was it was trains, planes, and automobiles for those guys, but they were always there and always committed, but it wasn't easy for them.
I
So
I I remember the one story that Zawada, him and I still kind of keep in touch.
mhm,
And he's like, man, I think last year he said he flew to Medicine Hat and then to Sask, and like he
mhm.
was like 4 different ways to get there. I was like, Jesus,
Yeah,
man.
quite often he'd have to fly right over top of Saskatoon to Calgary and then turn around and come back to
No
Saskatoon. But
parachute,
it's
eh?
been easier for him this year. Because he's living in Texas and he just flies to Toronto. So yeah,
Good old, good old National League flight
I-
schedule a
if
bit,
if you
Cameron.
call that easy,
Yeah. I wanted you to take us back. There's a story that I'm after. The Robert Church draft story when revolve around like Minnesota with Cameron Flint. What's the
hmm
draft story behind that?
Well, um, uh, let me see here. How can I be diplomatic without? Well, I'd actually really like Cameron Flynn. I coached against him. He played in Brampton. He was a really, really talented player, really athletic. But when we spoke to him pre-draft, he didn't seem particularly thrilled about playing in the NLL period, especially I think in Edmonton. I think he was still living in Denver. He went to school there, and we really liked Robert Church. I mean, he was on our radar big time. Mark had played with him, obviously, in Coquitlam, and they were good buddies. And I just loved his game and his passion for the game. So we flipped picks, and they took Flint, and I actually got Nick Billick too somehow because I guess Billick didn't want to live in Minnesota anymore. So I'm like, yeah, I'll take Nick Billick. I loved him. So that's how it worked out. And they took Flint, and we took Robert, and the rest is history.
Yeah,
So.
we've heard of Robert Church. I've never heard of Cameron Flint, so I feel like you did. I feel like you did okay in that one. Is
Toller
Toller
would
like
know. I mean,
is Toller
he
with
was a
us or
very
is
good
he just
player,
there?
but I see
Is
him, but
Tol-
I don't hear him.
we
Maybe
can see
maybe
him, but
maybe hearing him's not a bad not hearing him's not a bad thing.
I feel like I said the same thing before you got on there, Jammer. So we'll just keep chugging away here. When players like guys you've had for most of their careers, like Robert and Mark and obviously Ryan and Shanksy,
Mhm.
when they look back on playing for you, what do you hope that they say about Derek Keenan?
Just that I was always honest with them, and um, you know that I and I and I that hopefully I made it a fun atmosphere to be around too. And I think we always do. And obviously the game's intense, and everybody wants to win, and we of course do. But you got to have some fun too. And I think we've done that. And again, I think I've built relationships with a lot of those guys, and even Mark Matthews, who I made a really, really hard decision there a couple years ago to trade him. We're very close still, and we stay in touch all the time. I heard from him right after the game the other night, after the 300th, and stuff like that's is important. And you know, yeah, just that I was honest with them, and we had fun together, and win the odd championship helps too.
Okay, so let's now that was my next question. So I just kind of want to double back and get a little bit more of an in-depth answer. How hard was that to trademark? Because I personally know
Hmm.
how tight you guys are, and how tight he is with Rhino, and they got like the families like you and Al are like 8 and 9,
Hmm.
like and
Hmm.
I do know a backstory that you guys had spoke before the trade, and you had, and again, I don't know if this is true or not, but you had asked them like, "Hey, Mark, like we're gonna trade you. Is that okay? Like, if not, you can stay, but like we
Hmm.
think we're gonna trade you." And so just kind of touch on that, on the difficulty of doing that, and then a little bit of the story behind it.
Yeah, it was really difficult. I mean, it was he's been the best player in the franchise history, and he was he was our off floor leader. He kind of led all the shenanigans and the fun, and that's an important part of it too, like I said. And obviously an incredible player on the floor. And I'll tell you one thing about Mark. Mark was always about winning. He could care less who got the goals, who got the assists, who did this, who did that. It was about winning for him. And obviously we had a couple tough years there, and we kind of needed to turn things over, and I needed to get some assets, and he was our most valuable asset at the time, and that was the way to kind of do it. But on a personal level, a lot of times, because of logistics and um, you know, time and distance, and you just don't have time to go and sit down with guys to explain these things. But with Mark, I did, and we met on a Sunday. He was coming back from about a 3-day long bachelor party, and he wasn't in very good shape. But we met and we discussed it, and that was kind of it. And I thought it was really important that we meet face to face, and kind of explain things as best as I could. And honestly, at the time too, I really felt that it would be the best for him, because he had just started a full-time job, which was fairly labor intensive, which means he didn't have enough time to get to the gym anymore. His travel was a lot harder, a lot more intense. And like for him to just go to Toronto was easy and way less travel. And I mean, this guy's 6'5", 230 pounds, and getting on a plane every weekend's pretty tough. So I think that unfortunately got hurt his first year at the end of the season there, and it kind of took him out the next year. But at the end of the day, he's going to really help them turn things around there for sure.
There were some long nights at the ranch house when they were lived in Edmonton. That was one of Marky's favorite things. I was too young to be in there, but somehow I was in there with my brother's passport. But that's
Yeah.
an
Yeah,
one of
Mark,
the.
like he liked he lived in Sask for a year too, and they had some fun. So yeah.
Mark,
I
Mark,
I
Mark's
want to
one,
jump.
Mark's one of the best. Like he's a good guy. He's a genuine human being. He's fucking hilarious.
Hmm.
Like he is, and when you get him and Shane Jackson together, and it's just the perfect 1-2 punch ever. Like
Yeah.
they are just absolutely hilarious together. Like
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
got nothing but great things to say about Mark.
And he probably likes fishing more than I do, even, which is pretty crazy. But he loves to fish. Yeah, just
Oh
loves
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I want to jump back to the Brody Merrill trade that went to Iannucci, then the Paul Rabel
Hmm. Hmm.
holdouts. And then if you tie it all in, Derek, like you can tie in Holden Garland, Brian Barnable, Zach Mans, Adam J, Levi Anderson, Jake Boudreau, like pretty much the entire roster like came from, you could tie them into these trades from way back then. How
Hmm.
much, like, this is when I'm talking about GOAT status as a GM. Like, I don't see a lot of GMs, turning over pieces early enough in order to stay as good as you have been.
Mhm.
How was that? How did you do
And
it?
and Derek, hold on. Before
Uh,
you
uh,
answer this, can you really dumb this down for a guy like me? Because I've had so much issues trying to figure out how a trade in 2012 with Nooch and Brody Merrill can equate to a 10-year-old Ryan Barnable.
When you
well,
get 6 first-round draft picks.
Like
I'll have
this
to
is
I'll have to
this
dumb
is
it down
crazy.
too because honestly I don't remember. Uh, but I know I got 3 firsts for Brody, and again that was another hard trade to make. It really was. Like
Yeah.
when we went to Edmonton, they obviously hadn't been very good for their first 4 years. And we kind of did a really quick turnaround. We weren't a young team. We brought Brody was still pretty young and in his prime, but the rest of the guys, I brought in like Bruce Alexander and Ryan Ward and a few other guys and a couple veterans, and we didn't really have a lot of picks. And we were really good our first year, and then our second year we weren't very good. And that was when we traded Brody, and we got 3 firsts for him, and I knew she was part of it, and he didn't want to sign, so we traded him. We got Rabel, which he didn't play, so I think we ended up at the end of the day we got like 4 or 5. I think we got a first for Nooch too, so that was 4. And then we just kind of from there, we got lucky, and I think Vancouver finished last, and we got Mark, and then well the rest is history. Like it just kind of kept going that way, and again, like I'm not gonna sit here like I was some genius. Like I was lucky. Like I was lucky that those picks fell where they fell. Like because
Yeah.
you don't know that. Like
Yeah.
like Vancouver, for instance, they won a championship in 2010. Like they were a good team. So it's just real luck at times. And somehow I think one year, I think when we got Ben McIntosh first overall, I think it was like Rochester's pick, who were always really good, but somehow for a year they weren't, and they finished last. I'm pretty sure that was Benny pick, but
Yeah.
yeah. So it was stuff like that, just kind of just like luck, to be honest. But that was a big one,
But
and it was a hard one too because I thought the world of Brody, and we're still pretty close today too.
What's the best trade that you've felt that you've done, and what's the worst trade? Is the best trade trading, Corey Small for those 2 picks that led into drafting your son?
Hmm. Uh, Probably, and I think there's more reason that, that's one of them. I think the Brody trade was pretty good. The trade for Mark has worked out pretty good because we got Levi Anderson and
Zach
oh,
Mans,
we got
Adam
Zach
J.
Mans. We got Zach Mans. Yeah. So yeah, Mans has been pretty good. So, I mean, those ones have worked out well, but they were really, really good pieces too that we moved, right? And but I think and Smallsy was a funny one because I loved him. Like I drafted him in the first round his first year. He was a really good player for us, tremendous shooter. But we had Mark, um, we had Zach Greer, we had Riley Lowen, um, and we just felt that and it kind of goes back. What happened was that year Curtis Knight got hurt and he couldn't play, so we had to play 4 lefties, and we were just no good with 4 lefties, and that's really what it came down to. And Corey was the guy that had at the time the most valuable, and Vancouver made the offer, and that's why we traded him. And that was again a hard one because I really thought the world of Corey. He was a tremendous player, still is today,
Yeah.
and tremendous shooter, really really good dude, like guy you want on your team anytime. But for us at that time, who we really felt we were ready to win a championship, we just we just felt we were better off with just 3 lefts and 4 rights, and we moved on from there.
so one of those pieces from the Mark trade was Adam J. How far along in his recovery is he, and do we see a return for him anytime soon?
He's probably only a couple weeks out. Yeah, he's gonna travel this weekend to Vegas and practice on Thursday, and then probably a week or 2 after that. I hope. Yeah, he's been really good for us. He brings a physical element, and another really good guy in the room. And
Underrated.
yeah, he is. Yeah, he's good, real good player. It's funny, you say that about you ask about Adam because not a lot of people think about him, but Jamie Dowek and I we're really good friends, and when we were doing that deal, like I literally hung on for like 3 weeks because he didn't want to give me Adam. And I just kept saying, I got to have him. And it kind of came down to, well, he still got to work for me at the track. I said, I don't care where he works. He can work at the track. That's fine with me. He's like, okay, done. So, yeah, that's kind of how that fell out.
Every fan base loves free agent signings, especially like guys like Frick and I who try to break everything on the internet. Do you think free agency in the NL is overrated compared to drafting, developing, and timing up trades?
I wouldn't say it's overrated. I would say that the other parts are a little more important, you know. And again, like I said, retaining your guys that you want to retain too. If you can do that, I think is important. So, but you know what? Like you can hit the jackpot on free agency. You know, I think Vancouver's done a really good job with it, and over time, San Diego's done a good job with. Like they've been competitive every year in the league since they came in. So but for us, we're like I said, we're kind of an island market team, and it's tough to get guys. Certainly when they're at that stage, they're probably on to other parts of their lives too, and they're not going to move there. So we're pretty lucky now. We got like 5 young guys that live in the market, and they're doing some work for the team and that. So it's pretty good. But yeah, the free agency part is important. You hit the right one. I mean, Frankie technically was a free agent, but I traded for him, and he had been franchised for San Diego. I traded Rubes for him, who was going to be a free agent, and that one made sense for us because we kind of struggled in goal there for a couple of years, and he's been real solid for us. So, and again, he's another guy that we retained. We signed him halfway through last year for a couple more years.
Couple more here, Derek. I want to go back to last season, Game 3 loss to the Buffalo Bandits. When you look back at that night now, what's the most disappointment or lessons that you came out of it?
Well, for some reason, and I'm not really, we don't even have an answer to this day, or our guys could probably answer it better, but we didn't play our system on defense. And we were fortunate in the first half we were down 7-3, then we got a couple and we made it a game at 7-5, and then the same thing continued in the second half. And they're a hard enough team to play against anyway, but when you abandon your system almost completely, we didn't really have a chance. So their offense, when they get rolling, and especially in that building, really difficult to curb that. And we basically gave them the middle of the floor the whole game, which is not really what we're supposed to do. And whether it was fatigue or I don't know, like it had been I can't say it was fatigue because we didn't play back to back or anything. Guys got in good. We had a decent practice, and so just one of those nights where you know what, you tip your hat to the other team and go, they're really really good, and they got rolling. And like I said, in that building with 19,000, they get rolling. It's pretty tough. We just couldn't stop the bleeding, like no matter what. And then we get looks at the other end, and then Vino at his age, like he was unbelievable. Like he and we kind of got to him, and we kind of got to him the week before. And if honestly, when I look back at that series, I thought game 1 was our best game, and we didn't win. But I thought it was our best game. We played okay in game 2. We won. We kind of took it away late, but that was our best game. So I look back and go, you know what? If we had buried a couple more, I think on our power play, we probably would have won that one, and who knows? But it's history now. And like I said, Buffalo were way better than us, especially in the second half, and they earned the win.
Derek, you like to go about like calm presence, and one of the things that's been coming up lately is the social media presence from the Saskatchewan Rush. How much fuel to the fire do you think that added for Buffalo?
See, well, you know what? If I knew more about the social media, I could answer that, but I really don't know a lot about it, so I'm not really sure. Why was there some bad stuff on there?
Well, it's just
You mean you're not on
it gets funny. It gets.
I might have to address that then, because the last thing you ever want to do is poke the bear, right?
Yeah.
Although I think there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it out there, I think, though. So I mean, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
So we had Austin Shanks on one of our very first episodes, and he talked about Derek Keenan teaching him a 50 goal shot. Do you have any
Hmm.
other advice for younger lacrosse players, like just to kind of build on their goal scoring abilities, or any kind of just like loose lips advice you can have?
Shoot to the pipes as much as possible. It drives me crazy. Who's the interview? Oh, Pat Coyle. It was classic. His interview the other when they against Georgia when he said they hit. I don't understand guys throwing in the middle of the net. I could see a couple times, but not 40 times. And that's like, I mean, hey, guys like to shoot 5-hole, but I mean, I was never a guy to do that, which is okay. I mean, it's there sometimes, but you got to pick your spots on it. And shooting to the pipes is a lot better bet than shooting to the middle of the net in my mind.
What's the biggest mistake that you see the young generation make in today?
For players,
Yeah,
um,
and coaches.
geez.
Yeah, we can go coaches too, Jeremy. You got a couple coaches
Well,
on board.
I would say that, and I've gone through this a lot, especially being in remote markets. So I think lacrosse is kind of the opposite of hockey right now in terms of not in every market, but hockey has really gone to skill development and 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 like one-on-one skill coaching and skill coaches at every practice, and they become less sort of system oriented, which I kind of like. Um, but then when you get them, probably when they're a little bit older, it's harder to teach them. But whereas lacrosse, sometimes young coaches with young teams, they get way, way too wrapped up in systems instead of skill development. And I'll say this, no matter what coaching camp or clinic I do, skill development is the most important thing. It really is. And systems in lacrosse really aren't overly complicated. Like they're not, in my mind. But that's the most important thing. And from the player perspective, you know what? Probably the opposite. Well, like get to know your systems. Because the skill development, I think, is really there, especially at the higher levels. And then it's get the buy-in to your system because not everybody buys in. I think especially old guys that kind of have their own mindset. And if you get offensive guys to buy into what you want to do, that's really important. So I think for an offensive player, the buy-in is really important. It's a lot easier for D guys to get them to buy in than O guys. You know, um, that's kind of my theory on that.
So for like the system over skill debate, at which age would you say it's kind of more appropriate to be doing the skill development? And then at which point would you say that, that now let's get into like the system based stuff, like you skill development from
Hmm.
U9 to U13, and then you get into your system development at U13, or do we even think U13 might be a little bit too young?
A little. I mean, we got into. I mean, you got to remember, I coached the same group of kids since. Okay, I got to get my ages right here because it wasn't called that then. U10, I guess. So
Tyke. Yeah,
U10, U12.
you were Tyke with those Whippy boys, weren't you? Tyke
Not
novice.
novice,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
novice, and then all the way up through I guess it's U17. So, um, you know what? Honestly, until they were in Bantam age, we didn't even really have set power plays. We sent 3 lines out. So that was all the development we did. Then when we got into that age group, you could see kind of the skills separate a little bit, and you had your more highly skilled guys who could play in the power play and things like that. And we played 3 lines up and down, so everybody learned the offensive and defensive systems. And then once we got into U17, which at that point is pre-junior, which was all OD, then we really kind of got into you know, specializing, right? And again, by then you kind of can see a separation in what the skill sets are, who's going to be what player, and what position going forward. So that was when we really started to get into more of a professional type system and get kids ready for junior and beyond.
All right, Derek, and we'll get you out of here with this. We just kind of trying to end every interview off with a little bit of a rapid fire segment. Rapid fire is sponsored by Loading Lacrosse. Loading Lacrosse introduces the Tonka, the only head tough enough to stop a shot and jumpstart a car. Built like a truck. Use promo code Tonka for 15% off all items at loadinglax.com. What was Bandit Land like in the 90s?
The same as it is now. Absolutely crazy. Like
What
it
would you say
was,
what would you say the hardest position to replace is in lacrosse?
oh, goalie for sure. Yeah.
Who's the best player you've ever played with, coached against, or managed in lacrosse?
Probably the best player I ever played with was John Tavares, and 1B would be Gary Gate. I played with both of them. And who was the best I ever managed in lacrosse or coached?
Yeah.
Boy, I coached a lot of really good players, man. Like probably Mark, I guess, yeah, I would say Mark, but I coached a lot of really good ones.
One rule change in the NLL that you've loved, and then one that you've hated.
I like the 8-second rule. I'm not big on the new rule this year. The block and shot.
Yes.
I'm okay with it. I'm
Yes.
okay with it,
Rule.
but to me, it should be a possession. And to
Yeah.
me, there is so much gray area. Like it's crazy. Like like you wouldn't believe how many times it happens, and you don't really know what happens. But is it a penalty or is it not a penalty? And honestly, I don't think all the referees are on the same page in terms of what the interpretation is. That's the problem. So I'm sure they'll sort it out, but we got called for one, and it was a penalty. Like it was,
Yeah.
like as far as it's written, like it was a penalty. So
Should NLL teams be building around offense first or defense first?
if you had asked me 15 years ago, I'd say defense, but I'd say offense now because I think there's so many good athletes out there with good skills that can play defense.
Physical play is disappearing in the NLL. True or false?
I think it's false. I think it's still a pretty physical game.
All right, we'll get you out of here with one more. Do face-offs matter? And this is from Dawson. I'm of the firm belief that they don't. Very firm belief that they don't.
Okay,
And he just put this in. He just put this in to piss me off.
I'm gonna say yes.
Yeah,
Just for Dawson.
Yeah, stir it up, Jammer, stir it up. All right, hey, we'll get you out of here with this, and I don't know how many people. And I don't think a lot of these people will know this. The very last game that I ever played in real lacrosse, because I don't consider senior C or masters or any of that shit real lacrosse. But the very last game was when you called me up that day and asked me to come play in my dad's game with my brother. And so just before we got off here, I just from the bottom of my heart, I know it meant a lot to Jacqueline and Donna as well for me and Mitch to basically end it off with that. I couldn't be more appreciative of you and of the fact that you thought about me and my dad and my family to do that. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate that, Derek.
You're welcome. You bet. Thanks, guys. Hey, thanks for having me on. It was fun. Sorry, Toller, you couldn't be on there, but I'll be honest, I didn't really miss you, bud.
Hey, Derek, thank you so much, man.
I would have probably had to correct his lies probably 15 or 20 times. So.
How many more stories we're gonna hear? Can you correct one story? The one story is the story about him from the Colorado, him staying out late night.
Well, but there's some embellishment along the way, though. I'm not sure he was 3-2 in the game. And yeah, there's some truth, some half truth, and some bullshit.
Hey, Jammer, one sec before you log off there, just to make sure everything saves here.